here we go. OverDrive, off and running. TSN 1050 on the TSN app, your home smart speaker, and up on TSN for Bryan Hayes and Jonas, Siegel of The Athletic. Look at us in here working.
What should we talk about?
Well, there's a lot to talk about, isn't there? What a weekend.
What a weekend.
What a wild 72 hours. We're on Friday. It was so positive. Everything was great. The Leafs go out there and get hometown boy Scott Lawton, and Brandon Carlo becomes available. You're taking him off the hated Boston Bruins, and he's rolling into town at a reduced salary cap hit.
Like that.
And he's going to pair up with Morgan Riley, and it's going to be an awesome game on Saturday night, and the rest is history. And now they find a way to blow another 2-goal lead against Colorado. They got outplayed for the majority of the night. Now they're having team meetings, and Austin Matthews has taken optional skates in the morning, and they're in Utah tonight. It feels like a borderline must-win because Florida never loses. And
who's up next?
Florida on Thursday night. Yeah. And that's the thing, like perspective. Prior to these 3 games, they had won a lot of games. They had won a lot of games. And they had a 2-goal lead against San Jose. That's the point that burns you. You cannot piss away a point against San Jose. Nobody does it. They did it at home. Losing to Vegas, not at all unexpected. Losing to Colorado, not that surprising. Should have held on to a point. You're up 4-2 late into the second period, I believe it was. You got to get at least a point there. You have to. You're a good team. You're a veteran team. You got to hold on to a point. Turns out they don't. But now you turn the page over, and you're in Utah tonight. Florida again doesn't lose. You got 3 games left against Florida the rest of the way. Now the Mitch Marner stuff's in the air. There's a lot going on with this team.
Where should we start?
Well, I guess we'll start where we have honestly not talked a lot about Mitch Marner's contract this year. Like, yeah. I think he should be very, very happy with the way the media has handled this personally. I can't speak to fans. I can't speak to what his everyday life is like. I don't know if people are yelling and screaming at him as he walks down the street, if people are asking him constantly, what are you going to do? But for the most part, he showed up early in camp. He said, this is my plan. I'm not going to talk about it. I'm here for the year. And at times it's flared up, but not significantly. And this is a massive report that comes out on Friday night that the Leafs asked him to waive, and they were looking at Mikko Rantanen. Naturally, he's expected to speak on it. He spoke on it to an extent on Saturday after the game, and then continued with the same approach. I'm not going to talk about it. This is where I am. I'm not going to get into it. And I think the media asked him a few questions, and then my guess would be no one's going to ask him again until we get to the playoffs, or maybe until the end of the year.
So, as someone who covers the team all the time,
yeah, you're the best guy to ask.
The tough thing about it is, like, you're always asking yourself, like, how can I advance the story? What is there new to say about it? And for most of the year, it's felt like there's not a lot new to say about it. You and I have had our conversations. You and I think, are aligned on this. A rare point of agreement between us that we would wait until the playoffs have been determined. We see everything happen before signing him or not signing him. And I think that's where it kind of laid, where it's like, okay, I guess we'll see. But it seems like the Leafs were different, where they're trying to get a deal done. No deal is getting done for whatever reason, which is one of the many questions with this whole thing. Like, why is a deal not getting done? And then all the other questions are, well, why did they decide to do this? What was the chance of it actually happening? Like, there's just so many parts to this that I think are interesting and worth picking into.
Yeah, and we'll get into it throughout the afternoon. What appears very clear to me, you tell me if I'm wrong, is that Mitch Marner and his camp determined last summer that they are going to be committed to a plan, that they are not going to negotiate, and they are not going to waive.
So the first point I'm not sure I understood until now, because...
Do you agree with that, though? Do you agree with my assessment that that was their plan, the Marner camp? And I think you got to start with Mitch Marner, because Mitch
I don't know. I still don't know about the... Go ahead.
Mitch is going to play... Every athlete plays a role. I'll leave it to my agent. No, it's your life. It's your career. Your agent will execute the plan, but it's your decision to go forward with it. And my belief now, more than ever, and I think it was always the case, my belief was that Marner determined last summer, I am not talking with the Leafs at any point all year, and I am not waiving for anything. I am going to play out this whole season as a Maple Leaf, and then at the end of it, I'll let you know how I feel.
I don't know if the first point is true. It might be, but we had never gotten the message until now that they weren't... Like, it didn't sound like... I think there were talks. I know there were talks
I think the
But were there
Leafs were trying to instigate talks.
Right, but I think that's part of the problem with this whole thing. If they had come out on the first day, he had come out and said, I'm not talking about I'm not negotiating in the season. And that was a message that management got, the media got, fans got. I don't think any of this would be happening. But because it was like, well, they're talking throughout the season, and now it's like, well, it seems like there is no contract to be done, and the Leafs, I would assume, are frustrated and said, you know what, if we're not going to be able to get a contract and Mikko Rantanen suddenly becomes available, we will try to do that. But then I still don't understand why they thought he would waive, because this whole time, through all the storms that they've been through and he's been through, it's like he wants to stay. And like you and I talked about it, we were like, why? But he wants to stay, and like that's cool. Like it's his hometown team, I get it. But why they thought he might waive in this case with 20 games left in the season, like I don't understand.
And I'm not really a believer that was actually their plan. Like I think what has happened here is, at the crux of this is Brendan Shanahan, who's the guy who's been here for it all.
Mm-hmm.
And he was the one that was there at the draft table in 14 when they took Willie, in 15 when they took Mitch, and in 16 when they took Matthews.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the beginning of a world that he never wants to see come to an end. Brendan Shanahan, I don't believe, is comfortable in living in a world and operating in a world as the president of the Maple Leafs that doesn't exist with the likes of Matthews, Marner, and Nylander all playing for the team. I think he's completely uncomfortable with it. I think he dreams of them all retiring as Leafs and rewriting the record books and hopefully winning. But really, that's the world that he lives in, and I think he's always operated that way. So what I see happening here is the Rantanen, okay, well, he's available, will you waive, as more of a passive-aggressive bluff to try to push Marner into negotiating. And I think he called their bluff, and then a day or two later, Brad Treliving's going to come out and say, we love Mitch. Mitch, we want him here forever. We're in line with Mitch. And I think what has clearly happened here is what you and I agreed upon a few moments ago, that we've agreed upon this whole year, is not what the Leafs want to do. And I think it's because Shanahan and now Treliving, and prior to that it would have been Dubas, and prior to that it would have been Lamoriello, because the guy at the top makes the call with the biggest decisions, does not want to get to a point where the Maple Leafs exist without Matthews, Nylander, and Marner all on the team. So what I think has happened is the Maple Leafs have been poking and prodding at Marner, begging him to negotiate, and he keeps saying no, because he and his camp came up with the plan last summer. We're not negotiating, we're not waiving, we'll talk at the end of the year. And the Leafs just keep coming back, and then they're frustrated, and they're like, we're going to poke at him, and we're going to ask him to waive as a bluff, hoping that Mitch would say, oh, wait a minute, then let's negotiate. I don't want to do that.
You think that's it?
I absolutely believe that's what happened.
That seems like a huge miscalculation then.
Well, what would lead you to, why would you have faith in this front office finally putting their foot down with this guy of all guys?
I just don't understand why, after all the times where you could have traded him, especially 2 years ago.
But he's had a full no trade, full no move.
2 years ago, he had nothing.
Yes.
Until July 1, he had nothing. And to your point, like they've never really, I don't think, wrestled with it seriously enough. Now, they would say, well, we looked at it, but the type of offers that were out there were not commensurate with the player that they have.
If they ever even actually existed.
Right.
If they actually really poked around.
Which I don't know.
No. Exactly.
And I don't, and I given everything that's happened, it's hard to believe.
I don't believe they have.
And I remember us talking after last season and thinking, like, this has to be the time. When you go to those guys, you go to Mitch or whoever, and you say, you know what, we need a list of teams. And they never did that. Like, they never. And so that's why I find it so odd. Maybe you're right. Why now? You're like, what about now? You want to waive?
Again, I think.
But I just don't know that was going to force him into negotiating.
Well,
because he can just say, yeah, no thanks.
Exactly.
And you risk so much if this gets out, and it was going to get out. Like, this is too big.
Exactly. And listen, from a managerial standpoint, it would be malpractice not to consider a guy like Mikko Rantanen. Right. And that's why when you hear what Brad Treliving said yesterday, that now, we're aligned with Mitch, and we're only thinking about this year. You have to say that now because you're past the trade deadline. You can't think that way before it, because that's not the role of a manager. You can't be thinking in 19-game increments. You have to think about next year, the year after that,
sure,
and the 8 years in front of you, 10, 15 years in front of you. And obviously, if it's presented to you where the Leafs are uncertain what Marner's thinking right now. And that's my read on the situation. I could be wrong, but I think their head is in a blender right now because they're like, we don't know what this guy thinks and what he wants and if he wants to stay and if he's going to demand a certain number and if he's going to accept a certain number. I don't think they have a clue. And so their minds are racing and they're like, well, if he leaves and Rantanen's there, should we pounce on it? And again, they went to him. I guess they said, this is presented to you. He said, no, thank you. And now they're right back to square one, trying to figure out what they're going to do with Mitch Marner.
But how do you think this will affect the season, if at all?
Well, I will say this. I thought he was exceptional on Saturday night.
Yeah.
I thought he played brilliantly. He's been great all year. It has not affected him whatsoever all season, the way he's played. Like, Mitch Marner has been great. But
he's been great in every regular season.
Exactly. It was always going to come down to the playoffs in terms of the way the market responds. And what bothers me about this whole scenario and these reports that the Leafs are, they're trying to get him to negotiate and they're trying to bring him to the table is that clearly the playoffs do not matter for them.
Which is fascinating.
It doesn't matter because I believe, based on the reporting and based on what I've heard, you've heard a lot of different things, that if he were to call them up today and say, all right, I'll sign, whatever it is, you give a term,
yes,
the Rantanen deal. Let's just use that.
Sure.
Let's say Mitch Marner and Camp say, I'll do 8 years, $12 million. I think they would be dancing in the streets of Salt Lake City tonight. So I don't think it's about waiting for the playoffs.
No.
I think they could get swept in the first round and Marner's pointless and does nothing and they'd still sign him.
What do you think? Has this changed your opinion of what he wants to do?
No, not necessarily, because
I would say, like, it has increased I had always just assumed he's going to want to stay. And now I don't know.
Well, I put a little pie chart together today.
Did you?
Yeah, I put a little pie chart together.
Look
you
at
want
you
me to get
getting
into the
graphy.
pie chart? Well, I figured, you know what, the graphs, this is something.
Playing around in Excel today?
I want to get involved. Now, I had to rely on Doogie and Joe from the bridge because I had no idea what I was doing. So I must be honest, I haven't quite seen the pie chart yet, so I don't know what it's going to look like. But do you want me to run through my pie chart?
I love it.
Okay, there it is up on the screen. The way I see it, there are 4 outcomes here when it comes to the Maple Leafs and Marner. The two ends of the spectrum are the Maple Leafs walk from him. They determine we're out of the Mitch Marner business. Regardless how he feels, we're going to walk. The other end of the spectrum is Mitch Marner saying, I got to get out of Toronto. I don't want to be here. I don't care what you're offering, what your pitch is. I'm out. Those are the two ends of the spectrum. The two in the middle are Leafs win the negotiation. I'll get to that in a moment. And Marner wins the negotiation. I'll get to that in a moment. So my definition of a Maple Leaf win of the negotiation is actually just a fair contract. That's how much the goalposts have moved because it's Toronto and because of the way they've negotiated with these guys forever. So I would say anything under Matthews cap
is a win.
Is a win, and anything to the look of like 7 or 8 years on term. So if it's like a 7 or 8 year deal at $13 million, that would be a win for the Leafs. Not for any other team in the league. That would just be maybe a fair deal or actually really beneficial to the player for a lot of different reasons. But for the Leafs and their goalpost, that would be a win. A Mitch Marner win is 6 or less years at Matthews money or more. Here's how my pie chart would play out. Okay? 10% chance the Leafs walk from Marner. I think it's the lowest amount, the lowest number, is that they just determine we're out, we're walking, we're not doing this anymore. Like, they determine that without knowing what he'd accept. They come to that conclusion.
They watch the playoffs and they're like,
watch the playoffs, see it, and say, this core 4 philosophy's got to come to an end. Okay? I think there's a 10% chance that happens. There's a chance, but I think it's a very small chance based on history. Because again, you know what George Bush would famously say: "Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, well, you can't get fooled again." Right? That would be what I would say. Is all these people? I hear all these Leaf fans are like, "Oh, it's changing, it's different." They have operated the same way with these guys since day one.
Yeah.
I'm over with that this is finally going to come to an end. So 10% Leafs walk from Marner. 20% chance the Leafs win the negotiation. They actually hold strong and say, it's an 8-year deal at 12.5. Take it or leave it. And if you don't like it, you can leave. 20% chance that happens. I think there's a 20% chance Marner leaves. I think a 1 in 5, he decides, I got a young family. I want to get out of here. I want to be in a different, city, different state. I maybe want to move to the U.S. I don't know, and it's the fishbowl. It's just not working for me. He determines, regardless of what the Leafs are willing to give him, 20% Marner leaves. That leaves 50%. Marner wins the negotiation. And that's what I think. I think it may be even a higher percentage.
So why do you think that's the highest percentage? And now let me just say, by winning, you're saying he gets more than Matthews.
It's a 5 years, $14 million per.
Okay.
Like something like that. That's what I'm saying. Or, 6 years, 13
what if it's
and a half.
8 times 13.5?
That would still be a win for Marner, in my opinion, because it's more than Austin Matthews. Okay. That means the Leafs had to pay a guy more than their best player, their captain. There's no internal cap. And they kind of held to it the last time. This time they said, forget it. Mitch, you're the guy. You're getting more than the big dog up the middle.
So what do you think your percentage – this is a great – I think
like
this needs to be a new thing. Hazy's pie chart.
I think Hazy B's pie chart could be a Monday staple on this show.
I love it. What do you think your percentage for he walks was at the beginning of the season? Because I would have said
just because he wants out? Like,
yeah,
I don't want to do this anymore.
I'm good. I would have said like 5%.
Yeah, it was probably lower than the 20% I allotted him.
And so that's what I spent Sunday wondering, like, why does he want to, like, why might he want to leave? He might not. Like, we don't know.
Yes.
He has said, I want to stay, but if, like, you want to stay, well, then why not sign? Maybe the negotiations are going differently than they seem. I don't know. But I'm struggling with that because I had always assumed hometown guy, hometown team. He is like a legend in the franchise already.
Yeah.
Plays here the rest of his career. He's like, I don't know. He's got a Legends Row plaque.
Absolutely.
He's got it all.
Even if he doesn't win,
even if he doesn't win.
Happen. Yeah.
Right.
Like collectively, all of them, if they don't win.
So maybe it's just what you said. It's a fishbowl thing.
Well, yes, it could be a combination of a fishbowl. It could be something internal with the Leafs that I'm not aware of. I can't speak on. And it could be this is a lifestyle thing that you have to determine. Now, it would make sense to me. He's from Toronto. I believe his wife is from the area. I believe, he keeps saying, he talked about it on Saturday. They have a great support system off the ice. Mm-hmm. Young family. This would seem to make a lot of sense. You'd want to stay here. You're comfortable here. But it's a big life choice because ultimately, once you start having kids and a young family, wherever you go next, you could live there the rest of your life. Like realistically, that's something he's got to consider, and he's not alone. Every free agent could. Let's say he goes to Vegas. You may live in Vegas literally for the next 50 years.
Yeah,
like you might spend the summers in Muskoka, but your kids are going to school. Your kid, all that kind of stuff.
Well, and the pressure would be just different. The spotlight's different. Like
Very
he
different.
walks down whatever King Street, Queen Street. He's getting stopped everywhere.
He does one
that
of the 5 or 6 biggest celebrities in the city. I would say.
And if he goes to L.A., nobody will know who he is.
No one would have a clue. And that might be something that is very and I can't blame him for that.
No, me neither.
Like, it's his life. It's his choice. I'm not even, like, I see a lot of people going at Marner, and we'll get to that angle of it, why I think people react the way they react, and I think there's a few different reasons for it. But ultimately, he was given this contract. It's a no move, no trade. He can make that choice.
Yes.
He can do whatever he wants to do. And you can't say he hasn't been pulling his weight this year. He's been great for them. He's been their best player. Like, he's been arguably their best player all year. He's been outstanding for them. And Judgment Day is always going to be in 6 weeks. Mm-hmm. Boy, that's going to apply to Matthews and Nylander, all of them. Wall, Stolarz, all of them this season will be remembered based on what they do in the playoffs. That was always going to be the case. But, again, I look at the 50% of the pie chart, Marner wins it, because I think the negotiating tactic gets back to my original thought. He knows they're very uncomfortable in a world that doesn't include Mitch Marner as a Maple Leaf.
If that's the case, that's a brilliant turn of the tables, because you would have thought it was the other way around, where it's like you have to prove to us that you can do what you and I are talking about, but clearly that is not the case. Well, it's the other way around. And that's why I go back to 2 summers ago when they had the chance to turn this, if they wanted to, and there was a reason to, and they have this organizational shakeup. Treliving gets hired a month before Marner's no movement clause kicks in. They decide not to act. They decide we're going to stick with these guys. and you get locked in. Like for 2 seasons, he has all the control. If he doesn't want to get traded, he doesn't get traded. He can just walk this right to free agency and hold you over like he has all the leverage.
Yeah, he can do whatever he wants. Now he's supposed to fulfill his contract, and again, based on the regular season, he has.
Sure.
And in the playoffs, hasn't been great, but neither has Austin. Neither has Willie. Like, those guys haven't done enough either.
No.
So it's not like he's on his own.
But I think what's different for him, and where there's always been this undercurrent of he gets criticized too much, and like that is swirling around. And I think there is an element to he gets more criticized than they do, perhaps too much. Like if you want to do a little pie chart for who gets the most criticism, he's like 75%, 60%.
I think it's a very easy explanation on that. He's from here.
I don't think that's it. Why do we not talk about Tavares?
Well, Tavares, I think, A, gets enough, but B, okay.
Do your I want you to come back later.
Let me explain that. But the Tavares thing, I understand what you're saying, but when he got here, he jumped on a moving ship. It was already established. It was Matthews, Marner, Nylander's team, and he was the fourth guy. I always looked at him as the fourth Beatle.
Yeah, for sure.
He was always Ringo for me. I know he got paid 11. I know he got the captaincy, but he was always the second line guy. You get who Austin doesn't want to play with. Pull your weight, and he has, and he's done the right things and said the right things.
Yeah,
and even the contract negotiation, in retrospect, you look back and say, man, they paid him a lot in the cap. But at the time, it was just a celebration. John chose to come home.
Yeah.
So from a PR standpoint, he got such a head start.
Okay.
Because it wasn't about contract. It was, wow, he chose to come home. He was the chosen one that did it. That allowed him so much goodwill. Like, he got such a head start on all these guys. So I think that's a part of it. And now I would argue at the end, there's a lot of people that are split on this in terms of whether or not you need Tavares to be a part of this in the future. And if he is, he better take a huge discount because, and I think that's coming for him. Okay, you're a local guy. Don't be silly here now. Like, now you're up again. Don't be silly. But I think with Mitch, it's all, my impression has been Leaf fans and specifically people from the greater Toronto area have taken it more personally when it comes to his situation.
Because he's from here.
Because he's from here. And the understanding is Austin didn't grow up here. Austin didn't grow up dreaming of being a Leaf. He doesn't know the history. Willie didn't grow up here. Willie didn't dream of being a Leaf. Willie doesn't know the history. His dad played all over the league. He never played here. Mitch should know better. Mitch was one of us, quote unquote, before he made it. He's living the dream. And it's like, how dare you hold your status over Leaf fans? I think that's always been cutting at the edge of this.
So I think one dot that needs to be connected to that is 2019, when Matthews is negotiating another contract with the Leafs, and so is Marner, and Matthews gets that contract done in February. 5-year deal.
Overnight, out of nowhere.
11.6.
Quietly.
On that same day, Marner's agent, Darren Ferris, talks to Dave Feschuk, I believe it was Dave Feschuk in the Toronto Star, and says that Marner is being lowballed in talks with the Leafs. There's a super contentious negotiation. And I think that's when something shifted with the fan base. Like, I'm not a fan. Like, I don't know. That's how it feels from that point. It was like, oh, he's going to get more than this guy and this guy and this guy, and he's not going to take less, and he's not going to take 8 years. He's going to take 10.9 on a 6-year deal. And then the playoffs change. Because remember, in 2018, he was awesome. He was their best player in that series against Boston. Remember, the Bruins players were like talking about him in the handshake line. And
Cassidy was doing the same thing.
They were like, this guy's unbelievable.
Yep.
Then the contract happens. Then some playoffs happen. The team doesn't do well. He doesn't do well. And suddenly it's like, well, Rantanen's making 9.5 and he's making 10.9. He's not as good in the playoffs. And suddenly, like, this is just boiling. And now he's getting more criticized. And he feels that. Like, he's from here.
Yep.
People around him are from here. And so suddenly it's just like this is boiling more than it ever did with William, ever did with Austin, ever did with John. And I think you're right to connect it to the hometown thing, because it's like,
you should know better.
But it all connects even further back to what you talked about with Shanahan, where he has that press conference that one day, way, way, way back, that the teams he played on, the good teams, those players always took less.
Everyone took less, and none of them did. Well, you've hit on two things there. One, the connection to Matthews, which
is a big part of it.
I still believe is a part of this, right? And again, gets back to where it's the quote-unquote Marner wins the negotiation. I don't know what he's asking for. I don't know what he's looking for. We don't have those answers.
They've declined to talk about it.
Exactly. Would I be surprised if he looked at it as, well, he only signed for 4 years and got that, so I'll do 4 years at the same or better because the cap's going up now. Like, I fully expect that. Like, I expect that. And secondly, and I think this is more important in terms of where the fans view all of this, is clearly that PR disaster from 5.5 years ago has not affected him at all when it comes to the next time up.
I don't think it's been connected. And I think that's a mistake because now I think this is the same thing is happening again.
Right. But
where they're not realizing this is not good PR. This is not.
Or they don't care. And that again gets back to the core issue of what I'm saying. Local guy Leaf fans take it personally. That it's, and again, it's a business. I don't want to sound naive and goofy like we're living in a fantasy world. This is a business.
Yeah, like if I can get the most money, I want the most money.
I totally get it. But there was a lot of reporting on that 5.5 years ago, how it was tough on Marner.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that a lot of people started turning on him like, what are you doing? Why are you holding the team hostage here? Why aren't you showing up at camp? Why are you demanding this? What do you should know
Well,
better.
And meanwhile, at the same time, all those players in Tampa are taking less.
Everybody's taking less.
Different situation, but that doesn't come into it.
And then 5.5 years later, again, we're not at a breaking point yet. So Marner's argument could be, guys, I'm just playing out the year. Like I have another year left and we'll figure this out. And maybe it's simple in May or June. They just sign and they move on. But I don't get the impression that perceived PR nightmare that was so difficult to go through actually maybe affected them the way that we all thought it did, or that it was going to apply to some sort of different negotiation tactic in the future, because it feels like we're trending in a very similar direction.
Yeah.
The difference being he's a UFA as opposed to RFA.
Mm-hmm.
RFA couldn't go anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
UFA, you hit July 1, it's a totally different story. That 8th year is completely off the table, and then it becomes more and more likely he leaves, probably at that point. Man, there's a lot to get into here. And Jimmy Ralph coming up, Ralphie and Bonesy with the call
we just
tonight.
block off the whole 3 hours and just keep.
Well, CJ's coming up. We'll get more into CJ's reporting on it.
Mm-hmm.
I got to get another pie chart going for later today.
Yeah,
I think we need a 6 p.m. pie chart.
What was the one I was going to ask you to do?
Well, it was.
Oh yeah, pie chart and blame
pie chart. The
blame pie chart.
Blame pie chart. From the fan base, I guess.
From the fan base.
I could do a blame pie chart.
I like that. Do that.
All right, I'll try to come up with one.
This is a new bit. You got to go with this.
Yeah, pie charts they're the new craze.
Soon you're going to be doing like tables and you're going to have graphs.
Well,
and
here's why everyone loves
going.
Everyone loves a pie chart because it's so easy to follow.
Yeah.
Right? You start getting the squiggly lines and the goofy stuff or the dots all over the place. People can't follow that. A pie chart, everyone can follow. Everyone loves a pie chart.
Everyone loves pie.
That's valid too. All right, Jimmy Ralph coming up. Chris Johnston will join us. Craziness in the NFL as well. We'll touch on a lot of news in the NFL. We'll get to that a little bit later this afternoon. Overdrive continues. TSN 1050 and on TSN 4. All right, Overdrive continues, powered by FanDuel, bringing you everything from the opening line to the final score. Bryan Hayes, Jonas Siegel of The Athletic. Jimmy Ralph coming up here in a moment. Leafs in Utah tonight. Where's that on your list of must-see cities?
That's the one place I don't think I've ever gone to for a game. Obviously, it's the first one.
Yeah, first one tonight. Wonder how many Leaf fans will be there tonight.
They go everywhere, so probably some.
Be a good trip, like ski.
Salt Lake City, like who?
I don't know. It's not. Yeah, it's a Monday night in Salt Lake. I don't.
It's happening.
Think someone could find a party there? Ralphie probably could.
He could.
Ralphie probably played there in the minors. Bet you tore up Salt Lake City. Like Noodles always talks about it. He used to play there. You'll hear him with Jim Bowen tonight. Leafs in Utah playing the hockey club.
Joe Bowen.
What did I say? Jim Bowen?
Jim Bowen. This is Joe Ralph.
Joe Ralph and Jim Bowen with the call tonight for the hockey club and the Maple Leafs. Hey, Ralphie.
I probably played like Jim Bowen in the minors.
You ever get to Salt Lake?
Ask Noodles if he remembers there was a bar called the Green Parrot.
Yes.
In Salt Lake City, if I recall that correctly. I don't remember games, but I do remember establishments in a lot of cities.
I've heard of that one. He's mentioned it many times. He needed like a membership card or something to be able to drink there because of the booze laws, I guess, in Utah or whatever. Yeah, I've heard of that place. He's been there a few times.
Yeah. Well, that was a pretty big name. I didn't need that.
Yeah, that's true. They let you skate on all that kind of stuff, I'm sure, back in the day. It's interesting times here with the Leafs because, prior to these 3 games, they had won a lot. Maybe weren't playing the greatest of hockey. Jonas, you and I have had different viewpoints on that. But they kept racking up points, and now you lose 3 in a row. Florida doesn't lose. And all of a sudden you got this 4-point buffer. I can't say it's a must-win tonight, but it feels like a pretty significant game, doesn't it?
Yeah, if you want to set up for the game against Florida later this week as an important game, I think absolutely you've got to win tonight. And I think one of the big concerns going through it, coming back from the Four Nations break, is 6 of the 8 games they've given up multi goals in a period. And at the start of the year, we were talking about how they were winning the 3-1, 4-2 games, and how it was Brube hockey, and they were playing tougher. And they've gotten away from that. I mean, they've had, even the third period against Carolina, they got a 4-0 lead, and then it's 4-3 late, and you're scrambling to get a win. But it's the 2-3, and against Colorado, 4-goal periods against that are absolutely destroying them. So I think they were, Harry Neal always had a line: when you're coming out of a winning streak, you win a couple of games you should have lost, and when you're coming out of a losing streak, you lose a couple you should have won. And I kind of look at that, the Pittsburgh game especially was sort of a sign that things were starting to turn the other way. And, then you give up 2 in the third period against San Jose, and, the losing streak is on.
Well, so Ralphie, what you're talking about there with the team's defensive play, where do you think now the goalies fit in all this? And I'm going to ask you to do a mini Jerry's percentage, because I like stealing their bits.
Yes, please do.
I'm going to say it's 40% goaltending.
That wasn't the question. What are you doing?
That's a great answer, though.
Go for it. Take it from there.
Yeah, please run with that.
Well, what percentage are you asking?
I don't know. Now go. It's on you now.
I would say they're now asking their goaltenders, instead of make 2 or 3 big saves in a game, we're going to the 6 to 8 mark, and I think that's the tough part. You're seeing the Leaf goalies that we didn't see a lot of early in the year getting beat one-on-one shots. No screens, no tips, not off the rush, but just one-on-one. They're getting beat on shots. And, I think, even the McKinnon goal, and now you can still say it's Nathan McKinnon, it was on the power play, but those were the saves they were getting almost every game, 100%. So, like I said, I would say it's 40% because, even the game where Stolarz gives up 4 in Boston, arguably was one of the most valuable players in the game, that he kept Boston to 4. So I just think that's where they've been trending. And, if it's related to Chris Tanev, then you got to start giving him hard trophy consideration, because they're certainly a different team without him. But, there's still 4 other guys on the ice when he's out there.
Do you want to complete your Jerry's question? Do you have a different viewpoint?
No, I changed my question.
From Ralphie, or?
But yeah, actually, so I was going to ask you about the competition between the 2 starters, but now I'm going to scrap that and ask you, how much do you think workload now starts to become a thing for both guys? Both are like Stolarz next start will match a career high. Wool's already blown past a career high. How much do you think that factors into some of the dip?
Well, if it does, then you might be in trouble for the playoffs. If you're going to try to ride one guy, and get somebody hot to go. So I'm going to say a very small percentage, Jonas, with that, these guys have played most of their careers wanting to play 50, 60 games. So, and I'm not going to make an excuse with the schedule the way it's been for them, because, tell that Calgary was on the road for 2 weeks. Talk to LA or Vancouver about how tough your schedule is, and they'll laugh at you. So, but it is a stretch where they played a lot in a short period of time, and it might be overall team fatigue. But from a goaltender standpoint, I don't think it should be a factor at all.
With Jim Ralph, Leafs Hockey Club tonight in Utah, right here on TSN Radio. Mitch Marner, we all know what happened late last week, and, him speaking on it after the game on Saturday about his contract and him not getting into it, and he doesn't sound like he wants to negotiate or really talk about it much, throughout this season. You're around him a lot. You're around the team a lot. You've seen him play basically every game of his career. I haven't noticed any effect on the way he's played. I think he's been outstanding this year. I thought he was great on Saturday night. Have you noticed anything tangible about Marner and the way that he's going about his business that would suggest him in the final year of a contract is affecting him negatively, positively? Where do you stand on that?
No, I haven't seen anything that's affected this game. He had a dip about 4 or 5 games ago where he had a stretch where the points weren't coming. But I'm going to take a different take on it than most people. I think this might be an outstanding situation. I mean, you go into the playoffs, take them to the finals on your back, win a Conn Smythe trophy, and whether it's re-sign in Toronto or write your own ticket anywhere else. I think that's the best case scenario. You want to have the ultimate bargaining chip, do that. And, and carry them to where this team was expected to go in the last 4 or 5 years. I think where it becomes a concern, even if they only win a single playoff series again, I think then it becomes a concern. Now is this, an opportunity to say, okay, everybody's going to go in a different direction. So I think from Mitch Marner's standpoint and hopefully benefiting the Leafs, this is, take them, win 3 rounds, get to the finals, and be the best player in the league, and get paid accordingly when it's done, whether it's in Toronto or anyone else. So I think it's, a better situation than say you signed them in February and they're out in the first round again. Then what's the conversation going to be? So I think it's, an opportunity, both for Marner and for the Leafs that, you know what, you take us to where we want to go, and you're the best player we've got in the team, and the best player in the last 2 months of the playoffs. I think everybody can be happy with what the result is going to be. Especially if you think you've got to give him more than Matthews or Nathan McKinnon. It's a chance for him to show that he deserves it.
Yeah, it's the ultimate betting on yourself scenario. He's not the first athlete to do it, won't be the last, and it. From a Leaf perspective, it sounds as if they want to engage in negotiations, but it may free them up to make a different decision or feel better about a decision. That always should have been the play anyway. Like, it's frustrating to continuously get back into this. If Mitch wants to do that, that would have been in the best interest of the team, because you see it with all these other teams in the league that have to make tough decisions, ruthless decisions to change up the makeup of their team. Mm-hmm. And, the Leafs have largely been adverse to it in the past, and sounds like they still are when it comes to Marner. They'd sleep easier at night if they could just get him locked in. But if he doesn't want to do that, to your point, Ralphie, let's play it out. Let's see what happens.
I will say to Jim, can I just add to your point? I don't know if you guys remember this 21-22 season. He gets hurt, I think it's like December-ish, January-ish. I don't remember what the injury was. And there was all this talk about Marner's not shooting enough. And he comes back from the injury. Do you remember this, Jim? And suddenly he's just like, I'm going to score all the time. And from I think it was January 15th on, I think he was 3rd in the league in goals, tied for 1st in the league in points. And he's never looked better. And so I wonder, Jim, if you get something like that where he's kind of ticked off.
I think that'd be, again, in his best interest. Because fans are fickle, and everyone just wants the Leafs to win. That's at the core of it.
Yeah, sure.
It all is somewhat irrelevant. It's all different pieces to a puzzle, and it's a part of being a fan. But really, if you're a Leaf fan, you're just so desperate for them to win, and there will be such an appreciation for him to do that. I'm pissed. Watch this. I'm dragging this team to the promised land. People will be raving about that.
Yes,
but he's got to do it. That's the thing. He's got to deliver it.
Funny. What's funny about that, Jonas, is I don't remember him shooting more when he came back. But for some reason, did he not get hurt off a face-off at the start of the second period?
You remember the specifics of that?
Yeah, was it a Tuesday? And
it might have been against Philadelphia.
Right.
It was just off the draw.
That's when he got hurt. I think it was was it a high ankle sprain?
Well, that was last year he had a high ankle, wasn't it? Or the year before?
Another one? I don't know.
Maybe it's a couple. It was a high ankle last year, I believe, before the Boston series.
Yeah.
Last year he missed 6
I'm an idiot with my memory. I don't know. I remember the injury, but not what happened after.
Today's Monday, by the way.
Yeah, I got you. All right, Ralphie. Well, just make sure you make it to the studio to watch and call the game tonight. It'll be an interesting one. Losing 3 in a row, and we'll see the hockey club up close and personal. We'll see what comes.
Yeah. By the way, this is I think the 4th time they've lost 3 in a row this year, and the combined games after the losing streaks they're 13-0. So that's I'm going to stick with that.
Okay, I'm looking forward to it tonight. Should be a good one. Enjoy it, Ralphie. Thank you for doing this.
All right, thanks, boys.
There's Jim Ralph. He and Joe Bone will have the call tonight. Leafs in Utah right here on TSN Radio. And Ralphie brings up, listen, this is also a part of it that from a Leaf perspective, I'd love to see, and we don't know all the details of what's going on behind the scenes, but if Mitch just wants to play it out, then say, fine. We're not calling. Well, let's play it out. It's not a bad thing. It's business. You got a year left. That's the way you want to play it. We can breathe. We can puff our chest out. We can have faith in who we are and what we're going to be. And let him, along with the other guys, drag this team somewhere special and somewhere different because they've never done it and it's long overdue. And up to this point, they haven't proved collectively that they're capable of doing that. And that's the most astonishing thing, I think, when you talk to people outside of this market. This is year 9 of Matthews, Marner, and Nylander going to the playoffs 9 years in a row. Any other 3-pack of stars / superstars, if they were going into year 9 and at no point drag this team to the promised land or even to a conference final, it would have been over years ago.
That's what's so befuddling about, like, that they're already just ready to do it.
Right. And it's not that you don't love the players individually or they're not stars or great. That's not the point.
I think that's one of the
It's about the philosophy of team building and what is the goal of the organization.
And I think that hits at an interesting question for them because they've always taken the stance, which I understand, that we couldn't make the team better by removing one of those players. But I think the part that's missing from that is, could you make the team different and maybe different in a way that leads to better playoff success? And they just haven't explored it. And that's always, they don't want to explore.
That's always been the point. And that's the thing. It feels to me like they're just not comfortable with exploring the other option.
Right.
Because they didn't do it a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago.
Well, and like you see so many teams coming to Toronto, like you go on the road, and they just don't have the star power and they can't win games. And like they're just missing what the Leafs have. And so you take one of those guys out, and Tavares getting older, and suddenly maybe the Leafs aren't as, I don't know, potent in the regular season as they have been. Maybe they don't win as many games, and maybe you don't make the playoffs, or maybe you're right on the line. You know what I mean? Like maybe they're just freaked out about that.
And that's clearly what is very intoxicating. I feel like I say this every spring after they lose, and they determine they're bringing the band back. It's very easy to understand why that is a sales pitch that flies around Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment. These are stars. Everyone loves them. They sell jerseys. They sell tickets. They're going to be great during the regular season, and we're going to the playoffs every single year.
Yeah, 100 points every year.
And hopefully it changes some point in the playoffs. Obviously, they hope that happens. They don't know it. They couldn't possibly know it. You can't. I mean, there's enough sample size now to make you have to debate that internally, whether or not you think it's ever going to work. But everything else, that's a great sales. That's a great life, man.
Well, and other teams have not made that choice.
Life.
Other teams have said, you know what, we're going to swerve right here.
Yep. Exactly.
Tampa has done that many times.
Yeah. It's exactly what it is. It's like gambling. It's like having a very steady, great career.
Yes.
Where it's like you're going to have a 30-year career. You're going to make a few $100,000 a year. It's brilliant. You want to do that, or do you want to gamble? And maybe you're going to make, $1.5 million, $2 million a year, $5 million a year. Maybe you retire when you're 45. But the opposite is it doesn't work, and you're working the rest of your life, and you're chasing it or whatever it is. All right, Chris Johnston coming up in 15 minutes. Overdrive continues. TSN 1050 and on TSN 4. All right, Chris Johnston coming up. A lot of NHL news and notes. Raptors. I don't know what the Raptors are doing, man. They found a way to lose one over the weekend, which was shocking. But it's either them or Philly, Brooklyn. Like, it's a big race now because Philly's just going to lose every single game. Feels like they're never going to win again. And Brooklyn's kind of been committed to the tank, I'd say, for the last couple of months. So you're looking at either the 5th, 6th, or 7th best odds.
Philly's really interesting, too. I believe their pick, if it's not in the top 6, it goes to OKC.
Yeah, it's top 6 protected.
It's like OKC just needs another first-round pick.
Just like the Raptors with Pirtle and the Spurs.
It's a little like that Kessel season.
Well, there was no protection on that, though.
Right. I guess
like that changed the whole league.
Yes.
That Phil Kessel Maple Leaf debacle, which was not Phil's fault.
No.
Now you'll notice every trade is top 10 protected, top 5 protected for the most part. Everyone puts it in. It took so long because the Leafs had to get burned. Of course, it was the Leafs, and they weren't alone. But for the most part, I think that Kessel deal changed everything, because it wasn't just Sagan that year. The next year, Dougie Hamilton. They gave the 9th overall pick.
Yeah, it's tough.
the 2nd overall pick and the 9th overall pick. And it was Tyler Seguin and Dougie Hamilton.
Yeah, pretty good.
Who both turned into really good players, both local guys.
Yeah. Both win a cup.
Yeah. Both, exactly. Anyway, CJ coming up, Leafs in action tonight. A lot of news in the NFL. We'll get to that as we move forward as well. Jonas is in here. Overdrive continues. TSN 1050 and on TSN 4.